All right, Alexander, let's do a Q&A with the live stream that we did with Brian Berletic and Gonzalo Lira. And Commander Crossfire says, would a slow grind to break the not Z army over time actually result in less casualties for the Russians than a sweeping spearhead against Kiev?
I'm not in a position to answer that kind of question. I don't have that kind of military knowledge, but I think the answer is yes. I think that if you do a slow grind like the Russians are doing, probably it will lead to fewer casualties overall. But I mean, I take your point, and I'm not able to really give a short answer. I mean, bear something in mind. There's casualties, which are, a humanitarian loss, and then there's the political effect on casualties. Losing 6,000 men in a single day and gaining a complete victory may, if we're going to be brutally honest, not matter, rather matter far more and have far more negative political effects than losing 6,000 men over a year and still achieving a complete victory.
Commander Crossfire says, any chance Russia will supply Syria with S-300s to protect the skies from Israeli aggression, train and equip the Syrian army to be able to confront Israel in the Golan Heights?
Well, they have actually supplied Syria with S-300s, though apparently they retain very tight control over their use, and it's only one battery, apparently. They haven't provided more of these than they could do. Now, I think the Russians could start supplying that kind of weaponry to Syria. I think one of the reasons they're not doing so is that they want to keep some kind of bridge to Israel, and I think they also want to hold back on the supply of these systems to Syria as leverage over Israel. So, for example, you know, if you supply Iron Dome type systems to Ukraine, Israel, if you, Israel, do that, we will supply S-300s in large quantities to Syria. So I think that's probably the kind of game the Russians are playing at the moment. We shouldn't overstate the significance of these Israeli airstrikes. They've been ongoing ever since, well, the 1967 war, to be frank, and they have never achieved the kind of decisive outcomes that the Israelis have wanted.
All right. Linda Petit, thank you for that super chat. Ernest Gibson, thank you for that super chat. Paulina Sarko, thank you for that super sticker. Tabernak says, what will the consequences of losing the dollar reserve currency privilege be? Has the new tributary system with Chinese characteristics begun?
Yes, it's the short answer. It's going to take a while to work out, and we're looking at years, probably. I mean, not months. So I mean, it's not going to happen this year, or obviously not this year or next year. But I think we are now working towards a post-dollar world, and I think China will be at the center of it. And what will it look like? Well, I think that's a very difficult topic, a very big topic, one which we will have to discuss over many future programs, because I think it's too big a question, to be frank, to be answered in a live stream like this.
Sanjeva says Peskov is improving a little bit, but he needs to go. Completely hopeless spokesman who doesn't know how to play the PR game. Russia appears incompetent. It's not, but appears like that because of a few people like this. Actually, we talked
I
about
agree.
this during the live
We've
stream.
talked about this. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I agree with that completely. Yeah.
No Mayor One says, a question to shock you all, given his impact not only to his country, but indeed to the world establishment. Is there a case that Putin is the greatest leader, at least after the time of Bismarck?
Huge question. I think there's a famous story in ancient Greece about, don't give an estimate of someone until they're dead. Let's wait until Putin has left the political scene, his own time, when as we all must do, and then we can do a proper assessment of his political standing. What I will say is that at this moment in time, he dominates the global political landscape. He is far and away the outstanding leader today. And that is a remarkable thing, given that America and China are much more powerful countries than Russia is, and that the Russia that he inherited was a wreck. The fact that he dominates the world today is perhaps testament enough. But let's wait and see until, as I said, until his time is over before we do our final assessment of him.
Cam Lee, thank you for that super sticker. Axel O says, what happens to all the loans, the debt that were given to Ukraine when it ceases to exist or defaults? Doesn't this create down pressure to euro and pound?
Possibly, but as I said, I mean, they're never going to get that money back, and I'm sure they must know it. I'm going to say something. There are so many problems now accumulating in the EU that I think Ukraine is a big one. But I think in a kind of a strange way, if it all ends, if there's a sudden collapse, I mean, it will cease to be that bottomless well. It would actually take one particular problem away. So I don't think they're going to be worried too much about those loans because the problems internally are enormous and they're getting worse. And the Ukraine war is making them worse, not over the debt, but because of the energy problems and the raw materials problems and the loss of markets and all those things.
Katya Andrews, thank you for that super sticker. John Denugent, thank you very, very much for that super chat. Rufus says, thank you all for your valuable insight. I rarely get to view your live streams. Russia will never be secure while Zelensky is in power. Your thoughts?
I think that's the view that nearly everybody of consequence in Russia has now. Once upon a time, they thought they could do a deal with Zelensky. You know, Putin actually met Zelensky on the fringes of one of, I think it was the G20 meeting in, I think it was 2019. But I mean, I don't think they think that they can make there's any chance of any kind of negotiation or agreement with Zelensky now.
Sanjiva says, given the divisions which are prevalent in the South, a new alignment in BRICS is a generation away. Just look at India and China fighting today in Arunachal Pradesh. Unity will happen, but very slowly, don't you think?
Well, possibly. I mean, you know, sometimes things can happen surprisingly fast. And I come back to what I said about the Soviet-Chinese rift of the 1960s and the border dispute, which looked like it was going to spiral out of control at one time. There's lots of talk about nuclear weapons being used and all that sort of thing. And then suddenly, the two sides said, look, enough of this. Let's sit down and sort it out. And they did. And that happened very fast, so fast that nobody noticed. So I'm not going to say it could be that it will take as long as you say. I mean, I'm not, you know, in a position to look into the future in that with that kind of clarity because the future is always obscure. But perhaps one day the Indians and the Chinese will sit down and say, look, our imperative interests are in making friends of each other. Let's not let this dispute continue to hang over us. Let's sort it out. Let's find a way forward. Let's resolve our issues also with Pakistan, because this has been an area where China has committed itself and Pakistan has its issues with India. Let's move forward on our track. And, you know, that can happen suddenly. And I've seen that happen in international relations before.
Pavlos says, question to Gonzalo, if you feel you can answer, who is being sent to the front? Patriots, hopeless conscripts, are the people fighting in the Donbass from the east or west Ukraine, as far as you know? Gonzalo,
I think he answered. He answered. Yeah.
Meg, thank you for that super sticker. Envy Storm, thank you for that super sticker. Calbury, thank you for that super sticker. Klaus Vatne says, John Helmer article, not enough facilities and supply lines in order to treat the wounded properly. Brian actually answered that question during the live stream. Yov, thank you for that super chat. Sigrid Natalia says, would BRICS demanding a gold-backed currency for oil trade speed up NATO intervention in Ukraine due to panic? Will the trillions of US dollars in support lose their current value?
I think we touched on this actually during the live stream.
We touched upon
I think
that
there
as well,
would be.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, I think it would cause panic. I'm not sure it would be panic that would lead to an intervention in Ukraine, but I think we did talk about this.
Yeah. Commander Crossfire says NATO has no regard for Ukrainian lives. They may not use human wave tactics, but the tactics they do use absolutely disregard the human cost.
Yeah, I think this is
Thank you for
true,
that.
actually. I mean, I've never seen
Commando
any real
Crossfire.
expression of concerns about Ukrainian lives from any Western leader.
Robin R., thank you for that super chat. Danielle says, can you comment on the situation in Kosovo, Serbia? We talked about that, Danielle. Sanjiva says, Brian Gonzalo Alexander, I finally get what you meant by don't march on Moscow. It means Russia will fight no matter what the handicap is and will prevail because hardship is not an obstacle for them. And I can't fathom why the West doesn't see this in Russia's history. We talked
It's
about
a
that
lesson.
as
It's a
well.
lesson people never learn.
Denise, thank you for that awesome super sticker. Christian, Katie Benosh says, when will you guys have a meet and greet? England, Greece, incredible coverage, brave and informed guests. We're loyal and grateful listeners. Keep speaking the truth. Thank you, Christian.
Let's do it in let's do it in Greece.
That's a great idea.
Let's have a meetup in Greece. I mean, Gonzalo was joking about Kharkiv. I could joke about London, but Greece, frankly, the weather is so much better, and the food.
Tyler Durden says the petrodollar won't fall without a war. When will they hear air raid sirens in Riyadh?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm afraid that you may be right. It may turn out that way. I'm not going to say that is indeed what's going to happen, but it could be that way. And when will they hear air raid sirens in Riyadh? And who will be bombing Riyadh when those air raid sirens go? I don't know. I don't know that there will be such a war. I don't know how it's going to play out. I can imagine attempts to destabilize the situation in Saudi Arabia. There are ongoing attempts to do so in Turkey. I saw a very disturbing editorial in The Guardian, basically talking about the need to get rid of Erdogan, for example. So, but if that doesn't work, if regime change operations that way don't work, well, engineer an uprising somewhere in Saudi Arabia. When the Saudis act to put it down, as they will, say that you're coming to the rescue of these unfortunate people who are rising up against the Saudi tyranny, and that you must rescue them from the tyrant in Riyadh. And there, who knows, at that point, the bombs might fall. I'm not excluding it at all. It'd be a crazy thing to do. I mean, the effect on the world and on the Islamic world is just impossible to estimate, but, not impossible.
Klaus Vatne says still 190,000 fighting Ukraine soldiers from a Ukraine source.
That's right.
Brian
Yes, which is exact. Indeed, and it's exactly the same number as Colonel McGregor gave. So yes, it shows, by the way, that Colonel McGregor has reliable information.
Eric, thank you for that super sticker. Justeros Panama, thank you for that super sticker. The Spy Guy says, look at Monty's 42-43 campaign against Rommel for what the RU likely campaign. The Ukraine, look at the 1917 French army mutiny for next steps.
Yeah, possibly. Look, I mean, these are good historical parallels. Of course, we never know exactly how things will play out, but I think it is actually useful to look at what happened in previous wars. It does give you some insight sometimes into what might happen in this one.
Klaus Vatner says, please have Doug McGregor on.
Yeah.
Pale Pista, thank you for that super sticker. Morden Thompson says, this will end like Dien Bien Phu.
Yeah, Dien Bien Phu, absolutely, quite possibly. Well,
Dien Bien Phu,
Bakhmut is starting to look like Dien Bien Phu. For those who don't know, Dien Bien Phu was a place in North Vietnam, which the French, who were at that time trying to hold on to the whole of Vietnam, which was their former colony, they tried to fortify. They sent their troops there and got surrounded by the Vietnamese, and there was a long, long battle that lasted months until eventually the French capitulated. And that was basically the end of the French resistance in Vietnam. After that, the Americans came in. But it was Bakhmut has some similarities. I'm not going to say exactly the same. There are differences, obviously, but yeah, I can see that.
T-Tom says, is Kosovo escalation an attempt to lure Russia in the conflict to make Russia forced to directly conflict with NATO or to show Russia's inability to help, or simply trying to show the muscle on a small country?
We discussed this at length over the course of the program, but what I will simply say is that since we made that program, the situation in Kosovo remains incredibly tense, but it has not yet escalated into an outright war. And the reason for that, I think, is that both Vucic, the president of Serbia, and the authorities in Kosovo are still nervous of taking that final step that might explode into a war. So it's not yet happened.
Yeah. Tesla729, thank you for that super sticker. Elza says, we are talking about Germany and Merkel, that we're not serious about Minsk. What about the French?
Oh, I think we talked about that too, yeah.
Yeah. Barry Tremaine says, thank you guys for all you do. It's immensely important. Thank you, Barry, for that. Sanjeva says, Alexander, do you remember how different the Western media was about Beslan terrorist attacks on children, on the Budyanovsk hospital hostage crisis in 1995? So why are we surprised about their indifference to civilian deaths in Donbass?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I answered that as well. Just to repeat again, I was in Russia when Beslan happened.
Yeah. Norbert, thank you for that super sticker. Lorraine, thank you for that super sticker. Zahir, thank you for that super chat. John Matthew says, Duran, you promised to make a video about German industry LNG price, and can LNG replace Russian gas, and how much LNG really cost? Can you make it?
Yeah, we can make it. But I thought we've touched on this issue in many programs, but certainly we can make it, and we probably will, because it's an important topic, to put it mildly.
Yeah. Pilgrim Media says, Coach, please stop smoking. It can be done. We answered that question during the live stream. Danielle says, there is much political chaos being stirred up in South America and Peru and Argentina. It feels like the West is lashing out in all parts of the world. We tried to talk about Peru and Argentina. Congratulations to Argentina.
Yes, absolutely. Great congratulations. Well, yeah, and it's a part of the world which we need to talk about more, and we have various people we can talk to who are from the region, including, of course, Gonzalo himself. So no doubt we will be doing more programs dedicated to Argentina, to the whole of Latin America as things evolve there. But again, this is an enormous topic, a whole continent, and we can't just answer that fully in a live stream. About the West, or at least the neocons, trying to create trouble everywhere, that is true, but that's what neocons do.
Yeah. Michael, thank you for that super sticker. Gerald Armstrong says, anything new with Brazil and Bolsonaro?
I think we answered that one as well, yeah.
Is there anything new?
I haven't heard anything new. As I said, I am quite sure that Lula will become president, but I'm also sure that he will not be a very strong president, that opposition to him in Brazil will be very, very strong.
Elena says, Russian singer Shaman sings "We Rise." I think it expresses a general sentiment. Good song. Recommend.
Oh, right, okay. I will look out for it. Yeah.
Mr. Wonderful says, the opportunities lost to civilians over the failure to embrace Russia post-Soviet Union are tragic, particularly in terms of expansion into space.
Yeah. Agreed.
Elena says, haven't heard about how the Western travel industry is faring after a ban on flying over Russia. Do you know anything?
No, I don't. And well. It's a good question, but not well, I'm sure.
They're not faring well at all. Yeah. Summer of 1970, the U.S. is occupied by a hostile government that enforces its edicts using militarized police and propaganda spouting MSM.
Absolutely true. Correct. Yes.
Raul Pinto says, kudos to all the moderators. Great job, folks. Thank you for that, Raul. Care Brown says, the Great Reset wasn't constructed with any purpose. It was based purely on bankers' insatiable greed that will fundamentally break the mechanism onto which Western capitalism foundations are based on bankers' ability to indebt others.
We discussed this at length, yeah.
Yeah, Chris Wijnad says, obviously the most important podcast on earth right now. Good folks, strike that like button, please. Thank you for the truth. God bless and Godspeed from Chile, Southwest Ontario. Thank you,
You
Chris,
make
for
me
that.
blush. Thank you.
Yeah, G-Dogs 2K says, John Kiriakou, CIA whistleblower, reports that U.S. intelligence is 100% electronic with no human assets. So they are blind and don't care.
Now, we touched on this. By the way, I know John Kiriakou. He's a great man, a very, very brave person, a truth teller who paid a terrible price for what he did. And yes, he's told us this, and it's very disturbing, actually.
Summer of 1970 says, the best geopolitical channel in the world is the Duran, and the live chats and mods are also the best. Thank you for that. Suk says, I think the West has forgotten this is Russia, able to go toe-to-toe with the U.S., completely overwhelm Europe. Both sides don't realize what Russia is.
Agreed. I totally agree with that. I don't think they ever have done. I think Westerners are so in the grip of their own illusions about Russia, which are very, very long lasting, that I just don't think that they understand ever, whenever they take it on, what exactly it is that they are taking on. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for us, and it's a tragedy for them.
Radovid says, thank you all very much for your insight. Thank you, Radovid, for that. Where am I? Elena says, the mystical car country must be Iran, isn't it?
I'm not going to give anything away on this. It's not. It's
well, there was
a
an article
country
today,
that might.
Alexander. There was an article. There was an article
Oh.
today on RT which says that they're in a discussion for automobiles. I mean, I'm not saying that's the mystical car.
Well, this is Iran. This is Iran. But okay. Well, then I'm going to give away something. It was not Iran. It was an entirely different country, one which is on good terms with the West. Let's put it like that.
Okay. Where am I here? Michael says, do you think there are people in Washington who actually believe they can win a nuclear war? Nuclear winter.
We discussed this. We discussed that.
Actually, Gonzalo answered this, yeah.
Yeah.
G-Dog says, the U.S. couldn't manufacture M95 masks. Robert Kraft, the owner of the NFL Patriots, flew to China, bought 1 million masks, and donated them to hospitals.
Well, there you go. So I mean, true enough, yeah.
Yeah. Vesna, thank you for that super sticker. And Sparky says, in the old days, agriculture, heavy industry, and logistics were considered matters of national security in the U.S.
Yeah, true. And I can remember that U.S. I mean, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. Susie QRN, thank you for that super chat. Darren Alevi says, do you think after Ukraine's defeat, will Baltic governments slowly become more friendly to Russia once they realize the West is not a reliable partner?
I think we talked about this actually. Yeah.
Commander Crossfire says, any chance of answers from the 23rd live stream? I think we answered those, Commander Crossfire, but we'll double check.
So. Yeah. Sure,
double check. NGS says, will Russia go on the offensive or wait for a Ukraine implosion? Brian answered this question.
Yeah.
NGS. Glenn Arwood says, how much overall Russian support across Ukraine is there? I had heard a rumor positive for Russia was a majority.
We discussed this. Exactly, yes.
Yeah, discussed this. Sparky says, leaders in the West think they can just click on an icon to order armaments. They have no idea about production runs, lead times, or that they no longer have a skilled labor force. Very true,
I think
Sparky.
we discussed.
Brian, I think.
Brian answered this, yes.
Brian answered this one. Murat says, hi, Gonzalo. What is the mood of Ukrainians you may know in Kharkov towards Russia at this point?
Well, I think he answered that
Gonzalo
too,
answered. He talked about the mood. Yeah, he talked about the mood. Glenn Arwood says, commodities based on industrial, agricultural, and resources.
Yeah. Yes.
Sparky says, major flaw in just-in-time inventory is exposed.
Absolutely. I think it's been exposed now.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been exposed now over several years. I mean, it was during the pandemic as well, actually.
Yeah. Tupac Amaru, thank you for that super sticker. Takir, thank you for that super chat. Sparky says, in World War II, many small businesses dispersed throughout the UK made parts for the war. The war on small business in the modern West cancels that.
So that is completely true. That's absolutely right. That's exactly how it used to work. You had the big factories which brought in their supplies from the small factories, and the small factories and the small businesses also did an enormous amount of work directly supplying the armies as well. And with that swathe of small businesses having gone, in Britain, in the United States, wherever, that leaves it, it makes it very, very difficult to crank out production to the levels needed.
Mr. Wonderful says, President Putin is the most intelligent and articulate world leader since JFK. I urge all to watch the Putin interviews by Oliver Stone.
Absolutely, that is a parallel. It's good interviews and a good comparison, actually.
Ines Fad says, media. So how does Russia put out their media? The West has taken down RT and other Russian outlets. The West will only publicize what they want to.
I think Alex gave a very pithy and direct answer to this. If we can put it through, then the Russians certainly can.
Elza says, gentlemen, you should write Putin at the next Q&As.
Oh, yeah, of course. Monday.
Commander Crossfire says, the great tragedy is not that Russia can't get its message out to the West. It's that it can't get its message out to their own people, their friends.
I think this is, if you're talking about Russians, then of course, I think this has changed. I think that gradually, ever so gradually, Russian media is becoming more effective at explaining things to Russians. About Russia's friends, well, again, strangely enough and surprisingly enough, things that have been different than they have in the West. And I think that's probably less because of what the Russians do and more because of the fact that there are now Indian media, there's Chinese media, there's media in the Arab world to an extent and a degree that just didn't exist before. And they're skeptical and they're prepared to answer the kind of questions and do the sort of journalism that the Western media is not.
Tech Wong, thank you for that super sticker. Rob Junot says, well, in spite of censors, everyone hears Putin now. Nice conspiracy analysis, gentlemen. Honest peace to all. Yay, WikiLeaks.
I'm afraid people do not listen to Putin. I mean, I constantly encountering people telling me about things that Putin said, which he never did say. And they're usually the complete opposite of the kind of sentiments that the real Putin expresses. And where did they get all this nonsense about Putin from? Things that Putin said but never did say. Well, they get it from the media. I was reading an article by Simon Tisdall in which he talked about Putin talking about the need to set up a global Russian empire. When did Putin ever say anything like that? And then Tisdall provided a link, and it was to another article which he himself wrote. But people repeat these things.
Yeah, Rafiq Adams says, great discussion. Can you guys touch on the role ancestral ethnic hatred of Russians plays into the Ukraine conflict, especially in the US and the UK elite class?
We did discuss this huge topic over the course of this program, of the program itself. Yeah.
Philace, thank you for that super sticker. Commander Crossfire says, no one in Canada ever heard about Minsk 1-2. Putin woke up, went mad, and went to slaughter Ukraine, jealous of their freedom and wealth. Russians aren't involved. The lies.
Absolutely correct. There's a lot of truth of this. I mean, I'm not saying nobody knew about Minsk. I'm not saying that it was never mentioned in the media, but very few people in the West have ever really internalized the fact that there was an agreement. And just to repeat again what I said during the program itself, just before we made the program, we hosted here in London a very senior lawyer indeed, who's a friend of mine, and he had never heard of Minsk. And this is an extremely well-informed man.
Darren Levy says, Fiorella Isabel of the Convo Couch and RT would be a good guest to have on about Peru and Argentina.
Okay.
Noted. Thank you. Ricardo Afonso says, here in Canada, Trudeau hands out money to all MSM, both left and right. They all repeat what he tells them.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting and important. One wouldn't be surprised if it happens in other places too. But here in Britain, if it does happen, we don't hear about it, unsurprisingly.
Life of Brian says democracy is the leveraging of popular idiocy to legitimize elite corruption and vice versa.
Well, I'm going to push back on that. I mean, democracy as it's practiced today might be true, but of course, I question whether that's really democracy at all. In all honesty, so I think you're describing a lot about today, but don't call it democracy because democracy itself, which I have experienced. I mean, I remember a time when we approximated in the West much more closely to democracy as it's popularly understood, did used to produce, in my experience, good outcomes. It's since we've departed from that that the outcomes have become worse and worse.
Rafik Adams says, can you guys reach out to Jeffrey Sachs and do a podcast on the role of the neocons and follow up on EMJ interview if possible?
Wait.
Thanks. Yeah, wait. Where am I here? Mason Mead says, God bless all of the Duran. Thank you for that. Mr. Wonderful says, Bolsonaro has learned from Trump's mistakes.
Quite
Thank you for
possibly.
that, Mr. Wonderful. Orlando Santos, thank you for that super sticker. Glenn Arwood says, the West does not have empathy for life. And Rafik Adams says, can you guys do a podcast with Colonel McGregor?
Yeah, lots of requests for this.
Jam says, Gonzalo says, how is your book going? Excited to read it. That's what Jam said. Gonzalo talked about his book. Sam Bajawa says, the Quartet of Brilliance, keep telling the truth. Thank you, Samba. Mr. Dachi says, what do you guys think about the Nigerian president saying they have proof that Boko Haram terrorists are using Western weapons that were sent to Ukraine?
Well, I mean, I think we touched on this in the program, and is it surprising?
Yeah. Rafik Adams says, to what extent to which the demographic culture shift of the U.S. established since the 80s plays a part in the intransigence of the West?
Can you just repeat the question, because it was quite a complicated one? Sorry.
I actually answered this, I think. To what extent?
Yeah, I think
to what extent to which the demographic
culture
shift of the U.S. established since the 80s plays a part in the intransigence of the West?
We did answer it. It is a complex question. It's a good question, by the way, but I think we did give a pretty thorough answer to it.
Yeah. Mr. Wonderful says Canada is Soylent Green. Thank you for that. Clancy Woods says, I support you, Gonzalo. However, a lot of popular YouTube videos have been made attacking your character. Don't you think you should address the videos so more people will properly consider your beliefs?
Well, that is for Gonzalo himself to decide. I don't think we can comment on this.
Yeah. Sparky says Soylent Green is people. Sparky. Thank you for that. Commander Crossfire says, when Canadian veterans call the government for help, they get ads for assisted self-deletion. We run ads for assisted self-deletion. Think about that for a minute.
I mean, Gonzalo talked about that, and I would just add my support to what Gonzalo said. I mean, I have to say I find that absolutely, utterly horrifying. And how we've reached that point, I mean, once upon a time, in a galaxy far away, long ago, in other words, about 5 years ago, such a thing would have been unthinkable. I'm just astonished that such a thing could be seriously done today in a modern Western democracy, and it just tells you what a misanthropic culture we're developing in the West.
Fellow Athelward says the end goal of the Zio-Anglo alliance is to architect all nations and people into demoralized, soulless, and origin-less consumer slave class.
Well, yes.
Alex Glantz, thank you for that super sticker. Rafik Adams says, does this tie into Halford Mackinder thesis?
This is the thesis about you mustn't stop you must, that if all the Eurasia is united, it's the world island and it will dominate the world. This is, you know, this British theory of geopolitics. Mackinder was one of the original geopoliticians, and it was basically intended to support British foreign policy, which is to keep Eurasia divided. I think there's a lot of that still. Um, I think that if that is what they think, then they need to consider that what they're actually doing at the moment is not dividing Eurasia, it's accelerating the process of its integration. Because all the various Eurasian states, Russia, China, Iran, even Turkey, Central Asian states, they're saying to themselves, well, we're under so much pressure now from the Western powers that the best thing we can do is hold together by coming together. So it seems to be accelerating the process of Eurasian integration rather than pulling it apart.
Pav Srada says, what do you think of the mantra, we want Russia out, Americans in, and Germany down by NATO?
I discussed that at length in the program, I think. Yeah, I think it's still true, but it's true in a different way from what it was in the 40s.
From Bushgrad says, you guys are awesome. Thank you for that, Bushgrad. From AW, people traveling to Mexico to re-enter the U.S. as illegal in order to obtain housing and welfare. Rome has fallen.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, AW. From AW as well, the government has effectively lost control of London. Other cities may follow. Further, the invasion of Britain continues. At this stage, nothing but a coup will save Britain.
Well, I don't know about coup, but certainly the situation in Britain is very, very difficult indeed. And what you're obviously touching on is immigration. And of course, there's a very strong backlash against it in Britain too. But I mean, it's not only one problem, we're having accumulation of problems, piling one on top of the other. We're going to be doing a program about it.
Zayos says, good morning from New York City. You guys are the best. Thank you for that, Zayos.
Thank you.
From Eurogabor, Orban rejected land invasion into Serbia in '99 on NATO's request, given the good relationship between countries and a large Hungarian minority living there. What role Hungary would play in a clash?
Well, I think we talked about this in the program.
This was an excellent point. We discussed
excellent. Yeah, it was. I think we did. We did discuss it. Yeah. I mean, Orban is the outstanding leader, and he would oppose it, I'm sure.
Wired Woman says, thanks for all you do. Thank you for that, Wired Woman. Rafiq Adam says, excellent breakdown. Thanks for the clarification and explanation. It's so strange, this hatred. Let's talk about the hatred of Russians. Thank you for that. Ricardo Afonso says, the British believe that Russian resources are theirs and feel entitled to them. They look at Russia the way they look at Africa. They've been like that since Peter the Great.
I can confirm that up to a point, by the way. There are a lot of people in Britain in power, not part of the, as a percentage of the British population, they're tiny. But the British elite did invest very heavily in Russia in the 1990s. They saw this, that they'd won this great victory there. They're all going to move in. They're going to get control of the oil. They were going to get control of the gas. They're going to operate. They established lots of connections with various Russian oligarchs. The intelligence agencies thought that they would establish a lock grip on things, and then along comes Putin, and it all changes. And of course, they have been angry about it ever since. And there is some truth to this, yes.
Clancy Wood says, will the West recover if it collapses?
Yes. I mean, it's collapsed before and it's come back, and yes, it will. But I mean, it will be a different West.
Mr. Wonderful says, when looking back at the downfalls of British influence on history, we must balance the negative with the incredible contributions.
Absolutely. And I, as a Briton, I am very proud of those contributions. But, it's the realities of what Britain does today that concerns me most. And that has to be informed by some of the things it did.
Life of Brian says, imagine 50 clones of Yoel Roth in charge of the State Department, and it all makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
For that.
Very, very
Clancy
nicely
Wood
put,
says,
actually.
why are my super chats? Yeah. Why are my super chats not being read? We just read.
We just read them, yeah, exactly,
Will
yeah.
the West recover if it collapses? Yeah.
Absolutely,
Thank you
yeah.
for that, Clancy Woods. Sparky says, U.S. citizens always got on well with Russians. It was communism we hated.
I think that people overlook the fact, I think it's true, I think people overlook the fact that in the 19th century, Russia and the United States were very good friends. And at a personal level, you're quite right, they got on perfectly well. They still do.
Budweiser, thank you for that super sticker. Bella, thank you for that super sticker. Greg M says, would you consider doing an episode focused on explaining Minsk and associated historical events? Your audience are not all deeply familiar with such.
It's a good question, and at some point, perhaps we should and will.
Yeah. Donald W. says, hello, good day. Thank you, Donald W. for that great super chat. Ricardo says, Alex, have you considered doing a Sunday evening all clown world episode? I have a feeling that Alexander would be hilarious once he gets on a roll.
Well,
Maybe
I'm probably
we'll
not a match for Alex here.
Clown World.
We might.
Maybe we'll do a show and talk about all the ridiculous.
We'll think of the ridiculous, yes.
There's a lot of material
there's an awful
to
lot,
sort through.
Absolutely huge, an awful lot of material, actually, yeah. It's a thought.
Yeah. It's an idea, yeah. Thank you for that. JetSet.1 says, could you elaborate over the threats from Turkey about a potential occupation of one or more Greek islands? We answered this question.
We've answered this, yeah.
Yeah, we've answered this. Dimitra K says, thank you guys. You are awesome. Your guests are very informative as you. Keep it up. Thank you, Dimitra, for that. And that's everything.
Oh, wow. Okay. It was a great live stream, by the way.
For those questions.
Thank you for your questions.
Thank you very much.
And the questions also the questions make it a great live stream too. They drive it forward.
Take care.
Take care.